Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Kliga Reflections. How are you feeling today? I hope everything is going as smooth as possible, and if you're currently going through a rough patch, I hope things get better for you. As mentioned in the previous video, by the way, if you haven't seen it, I will link it on the description box so you can check it out. I would love to hear your 2 cents on the topic. I had been considering creating a kind of book club on finance, self-development, and health. Well, I am proud to announce that we start a series today. Today we will plunge into what it means to think clearly, how it can benefit our lives, and how we can implement it via different strategies and making little tweaks to our thinking. There's short form content that is running rampant anywhere you look, the almost race-like pace to life that we seem to have adopted, and the constant noise of be it exterior or interior, the distractions and responsibilities seem to put us in an interesting predicament nowadays. It seems like we have no time to reflect, to pause and contemplate, to delay a solution or decision. Everything seems to come with a 1 or 2 day time frame or notice, and because of that, our decisions really suffer. Have you maybe experienced this? The retrospective feeling that you have lacked the mental clarity to thoroughly assess a situation and thus you made a decision that you regret or that you don't feel entirely comfortable with? Well, listen, first of all, I completely feel you. And second, today's book might be one worth checking out for you. Of course, we are talking about Clear Thinking by the great Shane Parrish. I decided to choose this book to inaugurate our book club because I got immense value from it and I hope you can too. I read it relatively recently, at the end of last year to be exact. I was living in Germany for a couple of months and it was a time of my life where I focused on contemplation and in slowing down. I went for long walks quite frequently and sometimes even twice a day, and I woke up before sunrise every single day. It was one of my ways of processing the changes I was experiencing and reflecting on the decisions I made and how they had led me where I was. One day I stumbled upon this book on the English section of a random German bookshop and I was immediately drawn to it because it seemed to speak about everything that I had been reflecting on. So I hope it can do something similar to you. Now that we got that out of the way, what is this book about and how can it help you? The book is divided into 5 parts and it aims to ultimately build our, so to speak, clear thinking space. We will talk about some of the most important parts and takeaways and discuss what we can get from them. It goes without saying that a more thoroughly read will provide you with much more value, so I would link it below so you can check it out if what we talk about sounds appealing to you. Okay, and that being said, let's jump right to it. On the first part, we get presented with the so-called enemies of clear thinking. It starts with a quote which I really liked. Rationality is waste if you don't know when to use it. I think that is an excellent quote because it highlights the problem most of us face in certain situations. We might be rational, but we do not have an inner voice telling us, okay, you should stop and listen right now because your response to the situation is going to be important. We do not have a voice that warns us that we should exercise good judgment and thus we sit to our impulses and sometimes say or do stuff we later regret. It is not, what was I thinking? It is, what wasn't I thinking? And the answer is, because you responded to the emotion and emotions are not rational. And so we discuss this premise by starting to talk about triggers that disconnect us from rationality, the so-called default. First, we get presented with the emotion default, which is, in my opinion, pretty self-explanatory but seldom applied. We should not let ourselves get possessed with a moment. Then the author talks about the ego default, which emphasizes how significant it is to practice humility and trying to resist unearned confidence. Let's be honest, all of us have been wrong at some point but decided to double down on our argument because we felt losing that argument would affect the view that person had of us. Remember, in business and in relationships you cherish, it is a matter of being right, not feeling right. Please do not let your ego fool you. And last but not least, the inertia default. In all areas of life, starting something is really difficult, but so it is to stop it once you start it. Here, we get deeper into how inertia, the Latin word for laziness or idleness, applies to human behavior and our, at times, resistance to beneficial change. Now that we have named the enemies of clear thinking, we should counteract them, right? We would do so by gathering some power, evaluating our strength. That is why the second part of the book is called Building Forces, and it is divided in two subsections. It starts with self-accountability, or in other words, taking responsibility for your actions, abilities, and inabilities. The chapter starts with a quote by Jeff Bezos that goes, "Complaining is not a strategy. You have to work with the world as you find it, not as you would have it be." When put on a tough spot, be it with a colleague at work or with an acquaintance, all the energy that we spend on defending ourselves comes at the expense of the one thing that would make the situation better: moving on and doing what needs to be done. It's a choice we sometimes don't even realize we're making, and it costs us. Imagine you get fed up because you dealt with an arrogant or ungrateful customer or client and spend the next 3 hours livid because of it. Imagine somebody tapped on your shoulder and said, "You're about to spend 3 hours of energy on this. Are you sure it's worth it?" Well, what would you say? Of course not, right? This is something that I too have to drill into my own head. How you respond to something is always more important to your future happiness than the problem itself. Ask yourself, will this action make my future easier or harder? Let's not be chronic victims of circumstances. Then the author talks about self-knowledge, which sounds pretty self-explanatory too, right? Well, not quite. I remember a quote by Ronald Rumsfeld, I think he used to be the US Secretary of Defense, which changed my perception of what it means to know yourself. There are things you do not know, and you do not know that you do not know them. And the so-called unknown unknowns. What does this mean? I think humility is paramount to achieve great things and leave a lasting impact. Check yourself and what you know. And one more thing. In my opinion, the importance of knowing your limits and your boundaries far outweighs the amount of knowledge you have. Know yourself. Then we talk about self-control. This one is probably the most complicated one. Creating a space to reason instead of just reacting is never easy. It takes a lot of practice, mistakes, and patience. Here, Parrish says, it is about being able to view and manage your emotions as if they were inanimate objects, things that don't have the power to determine what you do unless you let them. Don't let your emotions sabotage the future. Having self-control enables you to keep them in check. I think I can speak for most of us when I say that the things that we have accomplished and the things that really matter have required us to do things we did not want or could not be bothered to do. A large part of achieving success is of any kind is having the self-control to do what needs to be done regardless of whether you want it or not. Another is self-confidence. Yes, it is always good to know you're good at something, to have your abilities and strengths celebrated. But for me, the real confidence is not the one you see when somebody thinks or says he or she has a talent for this or that. It is the one that stems from the strength to accept hard truths. And with hard truths, I mean inconvenient things in our lives that are not allowing us to move forward. Something that did not work out, an investment that went south, etc. Accepting it with courage and moving forward, knowing it tells nothing about your worth. That for me is real confidence. I like to call it the fuck it we ball mentality. Okay, and now that we have covered what the book is about, I would like to share with you some of the takeaways which provided me with the most value. Of course, there will be a lot of stuff not mentioned here that is equally or more valuable to you. So if you have read it, I see you in the comments and you can share some of the value you got out of the book with others. And by the way, do let me know what you think about the video structure and if you would change anything. It's very valuable to me to receive feedback and criticism to try to improve this section. The idea is to talk about books and give some valuable insights, but my intention is not to just summarize it, if you know what I mean. With that being said, this is a book that I really recommend for the overthinkers such as myself. Not to stop overthinking, but rather to do it properly and to do it with a purpose. It gives you tools for your decision making, for example, knowing when to postpone and when to make a decision based on its importance, named the ASAP or ALAP principles. In other words, learning to figure out when a decision needs deliberation or, on the other hand, to snap decide. Another valuable insight that I got was about trying to add more ideas into the mix when making a decision to avoid false dualities. Or simply put, a decision does not have to be black or white. Make the effort to come up with more solutions. Try to see what is valuable in your ideas and maybe you can try to mix them. The key is learning to live with the uncomfortable tension between opposing ideas long enough to see that there is a solution that combines the best elements of both. This book really went to town on the importance of mental clarity, so it also gave tools to try to create it for ourselves. I really like the HOLT principle, which is apparently used by recovering addicts, but I think everybody can get value from it. Before deciding to do something, is there anything that could damage my mental clarity? Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? The section about past decisions and acceptance really resonated with me too. For those who want to move forward and leave the past behind, something I have learned these last few years is that a decision or situation not accepted is an anchor to the past. We have to learn to accept and let go, to lighten up some baggage in order to move forward. Of course, I know that this is something easier said than done, but trust me, it is deeply needed. Don't be so hard on yourself. Of course, you have made mistakes, everybody has. What matters is how you act moving forward. What you learn from those mistakes has shaped you into a better human being. That's all we can do. Be happy for our victories and learn from our wrongs. Be happy in spite of what happened, and be kind with yourself. I also learned about concepts like the cost of opportunity, something that I had heard multiple times on finance and in life in general, but could not exactly tell what it meant. I read about interesting ideas like sleeping on a decision before telling anybody to see how you feel the next day, or really investing in the value of information you're getting. A concept really worth honing on because I think the quality of your decisions is only as good as the quality of information you're consuming. And with this, we end this little section about my takeaways for the book. I hope this video has added some value for you, and like I said at the start, I will link the book in the description if you want to check it out. Let's keep on learning and growing together. This has been the first chapter of our book club, and I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see each other very soon. Bye bye!